Final U.S. pork export numbers for 2015 show total shipments were up about 2% from 2014. For the second year in a row, Mexico imported more pork than any other country. Japan finished a place behind, but the value per pound of its purchases was far above Mexico's. At the Nebraska Pork Producers Annual Meeting in Lincoln last week, we talked about foreign markets with John Hinners from the U.S. Meat Export Federation. We began by asking about the importance of pork trade to U.S. hog producers.
Well, Jeff, when you look at the pork trade, it's essential that we have meaningful access to the world's market for our products. When you look at U.S. pork exports, the value added to those hogs that we produce here in the United States, and more importantly, the state of Nebraska, is nearly $50 for every market hog that we send to the market.
Where are the big buyers at? Give me the big international customers.
I'd say if you look at our top four markets as far as volume, that would make up 76% of our volume. You would look at Mexico, Japan, Korea, and then you would consider Hong Kong, China as one region. So those four areas would make up about 76% of our market. So as you well know, we're constantly working to make sure that trade flows well into those markets and that U.S. has a good piece of their share of those markets.
How do you feel pork exports closed out 2015 and are rolling here into 2016?
Well, 2015 was a interesting year. Certainly when you look at a couple things that happened. We had the West Coast port slowdown. That slowed down our first quarter of 2015. You know, that certainly didn't help matters at all. We were getting over some of the higher prices that we had saw in 2014, 2015 due to the PEDV virus that hit, in the United States. So our customers around the world were dealing with some increased prices. So we had some of those challenges that we dealt with. But one thing that we try to do with the U.S. pork is we never ever try to sell on price. We always try to market our product on the attributes of our U.S. Safety systems with, that we have at the plant. Our products, our pork quality assurance programs that we have here in the United States, so, and maybe some of our branded pork products. So prices maybe put off to the side a little bit if we can, and we always try to market on the high quality attributes that we have.
Does that mean it's more insulated to the rising and falling strength of the dollar?
Well, the strength of the dollar certainly doesn't help us in the export market when it gets stronger, but we try to insulate that by always talking about these other attributes, so we can, reduce that barrier of that strength of the dollar, if so be.
Where are the big competitors for the U.S. coming from?
When you look at competitors, around the world, certainly we'd have to look at Europe. This past year, Europe, if you look at where their pork was going, they were going into Russia with about 400,000 metric tons of pork. All of a sudden, when the Russia market closed to European pork, that European pork needed to find a new home. So a lot of that pork was going into Asia countries, going into China, going into Japan, Korea, as a frozen product. When that happened, the United States, the U.S. Meat Export Federation, were realizing the trends. We went into Japan with a little different strategy, constantly talking about our chilled pork, because we can get our product in chilled and never frozen, as opposed to the Europeans sending in frozen pork. So that was one of our strategies in the market, to constantly talk about the chilled, the fresh pork that the U.S. has to offer. And I think we've seen an uptick in that market based on that strategy. So we're constantly battling the Europeans. Let's not forget, our trading partners, even with Canada and Mexico, they are in the world market too. So they do compete with us to some degree in some of these markets as well.
Can you talk about Mexico and explain why they've risen to the top buyer of U.S. pork?
Well, Mexico's been a terrific market for the United States pork industry. Number one volume market for U.S. We send a tremendous amount of our hams into the Mexico market. A lot of that product does go into further processing. I think about 65% of that product does go into further processing. So we've seen a gradual increase in consumption, especially over the last 4 years with the Mexico consumer. What we're seeing is more interest in the U.S. pork product as a further processed product. And I think some of the partnerships that we've forged with importers and retailers, actually going out and promoting our product. Pork in general has been a win-win for the consumers in Mexico, and nonetheless, you're going to see more and more pork being consumed. The trend looks good for pork consumption in Mexico.
Outside of the big buyers that we had talked about earlier, are there emerging countries that you're trying to target and get more U.S. pork into?
There are countries. We exported Nebraska pork to over 105 different countries last year. But you got to remember, I talked about 4 of those countries taking up about 75% of the volume. So, the other 101 countries are going to make up that other 25%. I think South America, Central America, those countries are continuing to be good customers of U.S. product. We're going to look into Africa, and that's an emerging market. But nonetheless, you always have to go and sell some of your products, some of your high-end products where people are willing to pay. So, those markets are Japan, Korea. They have the money to buy some of our higher-end products. And then, of course, there are variety meats, some of the items that we don't consume here in the United States as much. There's always markets for some of those items, too, in some of the emerging markets.
The price for pork across the U.S., meanwhile, is the cheapest in months. USDA data shows January's retail value averaged $3.79 per pound, the lowest mark since July.